Hi, welcome to another video on Office 365. My name is Jeff Rhodes, and we're going to talk about what in other languages we call reflection, or getting the ability to go from the name of an object to the reference of an object, and how we might work around that in PowerApps. So this isn't actually in my book, but you can see it on the screen there, Creating Business Applications with Office 365. So you can pick that up on Amazon or wherever you get books. So you can see it there. We can go down and see how it's doing today. 14 in SharePoint guide, so not too bad, so appreciate that. Like I said, it's not actually in this, but the basis of how to do this kind of thing is all in that book. So let's go into Office and let me describe the app a little bit more. So I'm going to go into SharePoint. We're going to build something in a minute. But what we want to do is that the customer wants to have like basically an expert system inside of PowerApps, where you've got a set of buttons of here's the task, you click that button like writing, and then you've got another set of buttons that say, okay, here are the specific writing tasks: officer appraisal, civilian appraisal, awards, things like that. And then you click that button, and now you have another set of actual tasks. Here's step one, here's step two. They can have attachments, and then in the end, we submit it into our ticketing system. So what we want to do is make it so that the user could add these, what we're calling actions at the top level, tasks at the next level, and then the steps, and they could add any of those and the system would adapt to it. So where that went to is that we'd like to, okay, let's have a bunch of buttons, and then if they only have 3 of these actions, we'll set the text of the 3 buttons that are there and hide the rest. And that's where we get into this, where we want to kind of loop through the number of actions that we have and make the buttons adapt accordingly. And that's a little challenging in PowerApps, but I found, I think, a pretty decent workaround. So let's go ahead and get started. So first thing, I'm just going to make the first level custom list. I'm going to call it actions. And I'm going to leave the title, and then I just need 2 more columns. So let's do description, and I only need single line of text because I'm going to put it in as the tooltip, so it doesn't have to be double lines because it wouldn't work anyway. And then I want to have a number column that I'm going to call order. So we don't want to use the ID because they may change the order, they may insert one later, and that kind of thing. So I'm just going to do an example of 3 buttons. So you can see I've tried it before, so I'm going to say writing, and I'll just say use this for officer and civilian appraisals as well as awards. And I'll make that number 1. I could make it any one I want. It does require that I put them in order because this is going to link up to the button. So if I did like 1, 2, and 4, then it would still work, but then the spot where button number 3 is would be blank. So there's another one, budget, that I did before, some budget description. Make that number 2. And see, it remembered some of these that I did before. Submit travel forms. We'll do that as 3. All right, so let's jump over to PowerApps. I'm going to make just a blank canvas app, and I'll just call it dynamic buttons. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to link to that, to that list, and then do some stuff after that. So let's start with the data. So we're going to do SharePoint. And then it remembers I'm in samples, so I'll go there and I'll pick actions. And then what we need to do is I'm just going to make some buttons. So let's insert. We got button 1, button 2, button 3. That's actually all I'm going to do so far, because I'm going to have set properties of each of these. But you'll see I actually need these buttons to be there. But notice I'm not going to set their text or anything now. So I'm going to come up on the OnVisible. And so I should break for a minute. What would be in another language, what you would do is handle like the load event, or in here the visible event, and we read our collection and we move through and we'd get the first row and we'd set that first button, set its text and its tooltip and its visible, and then do button 2, button 3, and then we'd step through however many, say we had 3 rows, we'd step from 4 to 10 if we had 10 buttons and just set the visible of those all to false. But PowerApps doesn't work that way, so I had to play around a few different ways on how to get it to work. But here's the best that I came up with. So I'm going to build a different collection, and I'm going to add a column, and I'm going to go ahead and store the button reference that goes with the row. And then you'll see we'll get to do some good stuff with it from there. So I'm going to make a collection. I'll just call it call. And then that's our we're going to do it from our SharePoint list, but I want to add that column. So there's an add columns. And it's important you got to do this as part of this clear collect so it gets saved. Otherwise, what happens is you don't actually get it. So you see add columns, that's actions is our source. This is the name of the column, so I'm just going to call it button ref. And then this, now what I need to do is since I can't dynamically, say button 1, button 2 and build it from the name, I'm just going to do a switch or a case statement. So I'm going to say switch, and you'll see the first one is the value. So I'm going to read the order. Remember that order that I put in there. And then I just give each one. So if it's 1, I'm going to go ahead and put button 1 in there. See how I can actually put in the reference, which is kind of cool. And that's going to be really handy. That's why I had to draw the buttons first before I did this. 3. And then I have a default, so if we can't find it, I'll just use button 1. Whoops. And we can format that, and it gets a little clearer. All right, so that's kind of cool. So let's go look at that. Let's zoom it up so we can kind of run it for a second, just to let that run. And then we can go over to collections and look at it. So you can see it's got all the stuff in there. And it's got, if I scroll over, got all the stuff that's in the SharePoint list. But I've got my button ref as well. So that's kind of cool. All right, so what are we going to do next? Well, now the key is that we're going to set up our buttons appropriately. Okay, so let's first just get our text set up. So let's select text over here. And this is the part that's a little challenging because we have to do it in the button itself. But we can look up. Move our thing over here for a minute, second. So we can use the lookup function. And what we're going to look up is our collection. And then our condition is button ref equals self. And that's kind of the main insight there. So if we are, and we're going to put this into every button. So if we are the same button as that row, then that will actually find a value, and we'll say dot title. Let's copy that over. Notice that it doesn't have a value right now because we haven't run it yet. But we'll do that same thing for every button. And when we're done with, when we're done with all these, we'll copy these buttons more. All right, so let's go over to, while we're on that, let's go over to Tooltip now. So that's almost the same, but it's dot description. So we'll copy that over. Oops. All right, now let's talk about visible. Oops. Actually, let's save this. That's a good idea. And let's run it. On it. Because, yeah, that's actually probably because I didn't do a good job with the, because I did it on visible. Let me move that in a different spot when we're testing it here. Yeah. So let's put it on start instead. And then I'll come here and say run on start. And now we'll run it. Let's try that. Yeah. So see, now it put it in there, and then see how it's got our tooltip as well. So far so good. We've got it running. It's dynamically set the to what's in the SharePoint list, writing, budget, and travel, and loaded up the tooltip. All right, so let's go back to the, oops, I got this so long I can't see it. Oops. Here we go. All right. So let's talk about visible, because that's similar. And actually, let me copy this guy. Well, I don't need all of it, but I'll copy it just in case. And we'll come look at the visible. So what we want, if, then we're going to check our condition. If it's blank, oh, not black, blank. Oh, I copied the wrong, that's not what I wanted. I'll just do it again. I thought I copied. So we'll do our lookup. So if that's blank, then that means that we didn't have a row. In other words, because we only added button 1, button 2, button 3. So for button 4, 5, 6, because we only have 4 records, that's going to be blank. So we want the visible to be false, otherwise true, like that. So we'll copy that over. Oh, I did that one already. All right, and the last thing before we start copying these buttons then is, what are we going to do when we click on the button? Yeah, so what we're going to do is a variable, and we'll actually navigate to another screen. But for this, let's just insert a label just so that we can tell, and we'll put that over here. And we'll just say, okay, Actually, I'll do that in a minute. Let me do the OnSelect first so that I have the variable created. So I'm going to say set, because that's a global variable, because the normal will be wanting to do it. So we'll do selected ID, and again, we'll use that same kind of deal. So we'll look up, or actually even simpler. Yeah, this is how I originally did it. It turns out we didn't really need the ID. So let's just set the text. We'll just say selected action, we'll call it. And I'll just say self.text. These are going to be linked lists anyway, so it's actually just as easy. And it turns out when you use the ID, it starts messing with the delegation and that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to set that variable. And what would happen is we'd probably then navigate to the next page, and then we'll use that variable to filter the next list. Is kind of how the actual app works. But we'll come into here to OnSelect. Put that in there as well. And we'll say you clicked on selected action, that. Then we get really fancy. Let's set the visible of this. So we'll say if, or we'll just say if selected action not equal to quote, quote. See if that works. Oh, visible, let's see. I was expecting that to get hidden since we haven't done it yet. So if we've clicked on it, it'll have a value. Yeah, it's not sure why that's not working right now. But let's start again. We'll try that, and then I may have to use his blank as well. Yeah. Yeah, so it has the thing, it's just my visible is not quite right. So let's try that again. So now it will have a value, but that's okay. We'll just say, so we'll say is blank. And we'll say not is blank. Yeah, so I think that'll be right. We'll test it. Come through, and let's save that. And let's publish it so we can run it from scratch over in our other list here. So let's go ahead and play it from here and see what happens. There we go. Yeah, there we go. So if I click on it now, it says the budget, travel, and so we've basically gotten it. Oh yeah, so I haven't done everything I wanted though, because I forgot to put in the other button. So now that we've done all that, let's go back, and now let's do 3 more buttons. Actually, yeah, I'll just have to rename them. And I'll name this button 4. Button 5 and button 6. You can name them whatever you want. Just makes it a little simpler. All right, so if we run it here, you'll see they still stay dumb, stay hidden. But let's go ahead and save it and publish it again. let's go back to our list and let's just change this. So instead of travel, we'll just call it pay. And we'll say submit pay forms. And we'll add a new one too. So let's add and we'll just call it, oh, what else are we going to do? Clearances. Info on security clearances. I'll do this as number 4. All right, so let's go back to our app and let's run it again. Oh, I forget. See, now notice I do have to put that in there for all the buttons that I've done. So I got one more thing that I got to do. So that's why that didn't work. Let's go back here. Remember on my app start, now that I've got 6 buttons, I've got to go back and update this because I do have to put this from the buttons that we have. Oops. We got to say 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, button 6. So on this, if you decide that you're going to have a certain number of buttons, then you've got to go ahead and code those into this opening area. I made that too long right now. Let me see if I can fix it. There we go. So I can format that text and come back up. Okay. Let's save it again. And publish. So what we expect to have happen now is this one go ahead and show 4 buttons now and have the new text of the button. So we'll see. Yeah, there we go. So it went to pay. We've got a pay form now. This clearance button showed, and again we clicked on the right ones and it did it. So all right, well, I hope that was useful. Again, there's probably other ways to do it, but that was the best I could come up with to make it dynamic and still live within the constraints of PowerApps. Basically, the 2 that were coming in, again, not the ability to do reflection where we could just go from the name of the object to the object, and then also the fact of not really easily being able to loop through the records and do that as well. So there's some workarounds, but this avoids us having to do that because we set the properties right in the buttons. So until next time, don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more of these videos, and we'll see you soon.